Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Creative Cavern. So I'd already traced out my extra small Leo, and now I am just extending down the leg hole on both the front and the back. And then I'm going to add the seam allowance for the collar on the top. So just adding that seam allowance around the top neck hole and then going over to the back neck hole. Finishing up, truing up that line. Then I'm going to measure down to see how far I want the top to go, and then determining how far up I want the bottoms to go. And then I'm going to cut out my front and line that up with the back, and then just use my rotary cutter to cut them out so that I know that they're going to match up in the end. Then I'm going to trace out all of my style lines on the pattern, but I'm not going to cut it out yet. So adding the yoke and the princess seams on both the front and back, and then adding the color block for the bottoms. I added my hash marks and then my color labels. Now I'm adding more paper so that I can figure out exactly how large I want this front lapel to be. It's not a real lapel, it's just added on as an extension so that the collar kind of flips outward. Then I'm drafting out the actual collar, and I'm going to do this slightly larger than what the actual neck hole, or where the neck hole is, and then I'll trim that down a little bit later. So since I'm fully lining the costume, that's why I didn't cut all of these pieces out yet. So I'm going to sketch around everything and cut the lining out first. And then I'm going to finish out the pieces that I couldn't fit on that strip. Cut out all of the additional pieces that need to be cut out of green, lay those down, and then add the seam allowance around where I have those hash marks. Then I'm going to bring out the hollow fabric and do the same. So anywhere that there's those hash marks, I'm doing the dotted line so that I can add the seam allowance. This time I forgot to do it, and then I was like, oh, nope, just kidding. And there it is. And repeat the same process for all of the pieces that get black. And then this time I'm using my ruler and my tailor's chalk, or my chalk wheel. And then I'm over slightly off camera, I'm drafting out the piping, and I was just doing the math to make sure that I got all of the pieces that I needed. And once I did that, I just marked them off. Now I'm going to pull on this, and I pulled harder than what I actually needed to, because with some knit fabrics, they're not all knitted the same. So there's a certain type that if you pull on it and the edge rolls, not to get into like 1,000 details of it, but if you're trying to press it into like a fold, if it's not on that natural, like how it wants to fold, it's not going to go that way. You're going to be pressing it and it's never going to go. So pull on it, figure out where it's going to roll, and then you can iron it and it'll create a nice flat strip. So I just serged those together so that I can create a channel. And then I didn't have any cording, so I just crocheted a length of yarn so that I could make some cording. This isn't the best solution for it, but it works. The crochet has like little bumps, so the cording might appear a little bit bumpy whenever you're done with it, but it's fine. So if your bobbin, like if you're having problems getting it caught up inside of it, just throw some tape on the end of it and it'll block the edge from going through the fabric. Then I'm going to stitch that onto the fabric first. And then on the back side of it, I'm just following that line whenever attaching the next piece to it. And then I'm going to top stitch that down. Now on the bottoms, I'm top stitching on the hollow, just making sure that the seam allowance is caught underneath of it. You can see that on the bottom. Trying to get a good angle for it. Then slow-mo and freeze frame. Then I am stitching up the side seams, and I'm back stitching at the beginning and then back stitching at the end. Doing that on both sides. Then I'm going to take it over and I'm going to press it on my tailor's ham since it's a nice curved edge. So just using the side of my tailor's ham to get those nice and flat, and then I'm going to top stitch both sides down with a twin needle. Just making sure my seam allowance is flipped outward and trying to keep that the original seam line right down the center of that presser foot. Then I'm going to press those again, and I'm going to cut all of the seam allowance down inside of it so that there's not really any extra bulk inside of it. I'm just doing this kind of haphazardly. I don't care if it's kind of jagged as long as it's cut down. Then I'm going to serge the lining for the bottoms together, doing up both side seams and the crotch seam. And then I was trying to show you and my camera just would not focus. So you can kind of see what's going on there for a second. And then I'm going to like flat line both of these together. So I'm just going around the waist hole and then the leg holes and just serging those together. They don't need to be bag lined because the waistband is going to be attached, and then the leg holes are going to be bound in a fold over elastic. But I'm just going around so that they stay together nicely while I'm trying to attach the other two. You could baste it, but serging it's just easier for me. And then I'm pulling on it so that the pieces aren't like shifting and misaligning as it goes around. So you can see that I created the white line down the center. That's the fold over line. So I'm going to stitch up the center backs of both the elastic and the outer waistband. And then I'm going to line up the elastic to that line and then zigzag stitch all the way around while pulling on the elastic since it's slightly smaller than the waistband. And just keeping that aligned so that whenever it folds over, the two seam allowances on either side still match up. Now, I didn't particularly like the width of this elastic afterwards. I thought it would be fine, and then I decided I wanted it to be thicker, so I serged it on, top stitched it on, and then I cut it off. And then I attached a different waistband elastic on it. But if you know, you pre-plan it correctly, and this is how you would connect the two. So I went around, now I'm top stitching it down. Now you can do this from the front or the back. I chose to do it from the back this time just so that I was stitching down all of that serged thread so that it would stay nice and flat. You could do it from the opposite side and get a similar result. My bobbin thread doesn't really have a different appearance whenever it's on the front. Some machines do, mine seems like it's fine. So I'm just sewing the sides of the fold over elastic. I'm going to align the fold line that's on the elastic. You can kind of see where it kind of thins out a little bit. And I'm going to attach that down first, and I'm just using a lightning bolt stitch so I don't lose the elasticity around the leg. Going all the way around, and then I'm going to fold that over and then stitch that down. Now I only did it this way because with the back of the, like what covers the butt, it has more of a curve, so I was just using this technique so that it would all stay aligned and it wouldn't gape away from the fabric as I was trying to sew it. And now I'm going to start working on the top. So I'm stitching down the piping on the top using the same technique that I was doing before. I have the piping lined up to where I want it to be, even though the seam allowances aren't lined up. My outer seam allowance for the green is lined up to the 1/4 inch. Then following that stitch line again and stitching that down so that I get that first line of piping. And then I'm going to attach the yoke to the top of that. So just sewing on that yoke. And then the center front. So I did that on both sides, so now the front pieces are pretty much done. I still have to top stitch them, which I'll do after I do the back. So I'm doing this back the same exact way, attaching that piping. Then I'm going to sew on the center back piece on both sides. And then add the yoke. So now that all of that is done, I'm going to top stitch in the opposite direction that I did for the bottoms. So you can see I'm putting it underneath to top stitch onto the hollow, and then I decided, oh, I didn't decide, I was like, oh no, this is supposed to be top stitched the opposite way, so now I'm top stitching everything down onto the green instead. And I'm just using my zipper foot to get real nice and tight to that cording. And then I'm going to sew up the side seams and the shoulder seams on both the, what I'll call the fashion fabric, and then the lining. Although the lining is made out of the same fabric, minus all of the decorative bits. So I'm attaching the collar. I just lined up where the centers were, and you can see that they're a little bit longer, and I did that intentionally because I would like to cut it in the same curve as what I made that extension for the lapel. So now I'm just going around that curve, and then I'm going to fold everything in half so that I match up both sides. I was just figuring out which way is going to be the easiest for me to cut and for you to see. So I did that on both the lining and the fashion fabric. Now I'm going to apply the piping down the center front. I do this on both sides, and then I'm going to add the zipper that goes down the center front. Just finishing up the piping on the other side. And then I already attached one side of the zipper, and now I have the zipper completely closed, and I'm sewing it onto the opposite side. So whenever I take this off, and I'll show you, yay, zipper is attached, because I didn't show the zipper being attached to the last costume. I have it completely zipped up right now so that the piping edges are touching. Now I'm going to unzip it, and I'm going to stitch down the rest of the top where the zipper pull was. And now I'm lining up the seam allowance for the lining to go over the zipper. And I'm doing down both fronts, and then I'm going to flip that, well no, I'm not flipping it inside out yet. I'm going to do that, go all the way down, just writing that same stitch line that I put the zipper and the piping on. And then I'm trying to go around the collar, but my sewing machine just was not having it today. I felt like things were getting caught. So I ripped everything off and went over to the serger and just did that line on the top. Flipped it inside out. So I trimmed my corners, flipped everything inside out, and now I'm just going around the armholes and then where the waistband will get attached. And so now I'm doing the waist area, and I'm just trying to catch everything down in the position that I had already top stitched it. Now I'm going to do a really quick draft for a sleeve. So I took the amount of like sleeve cap that I needed, excuse me, plus the amount of like front and back is different. So I gently sloped one, sloped the other one a little bit more, and cut it out. Now on my dress form it does not look correct, but my dress form also doesn't have shoulders, so I attached those arms onto it myself. I created the lining, or not the lining, the cover for it, and it doesn't have anything up at the very top to kind of fill out the shoulder, so everything always looks ruffled right there whenever I add anything on it. Like if I put a sleeve on a costume and put it on the dress form, it doesn't look right. I sewed up the underarm seams, and now I'm just sewing on the fold over elastic. So you see this time, since it's just a straight line, I can control it well enough that I can just fold it over, and I'll keep it pinched, and I'll tug on it slightly to keep everything nice and flush as I'm going around the machine. And then I can insert those into the crop jacket. So I just aligned the underarm seam with the side seam and went all the way around, making sure that everything that's going under the needle isn't puckered so I don't get any unwanted bunching up at there, but again, on my dress form, it's going to do it anyways. And now I'm attaching the waistband. So this is what I ended up doing to the bottom as well. I used this 2-inch strip of elastic. I had sewn up the center back of it, which you can see right there, and just stitched it on and top stitched it down. It's just thicker, and I like the look of it. The other one was just too small. So just top stitching all of that down. And then it's completed. Oh, sorry, no, I ran out of bobbin thread. That's what's going on. So now I'm going in and finishing everything, and now it's completed. So I'm pretty happy with the way that this one turned out. It's more in line with the way that I would normally construct, so I was trying to like save on some things and, you know, do them quicker. And funny enough, this one is actually shorter than the rest of the videos, so I think that this is the way that I'm gonna go. This is the last costume for a little bit that I'm creating. I'm moving into the cosplay next. So my next video should be the project reveal for that costume. I'm still trying to figure out exactly like my editing techniques and everything that I want to use. I'm trying to figure out like getting a new camera because this is just a camcorder. It doesn't shoot in as high resolution that I would like. Like there's no 4K on this. I don't think there's 4K on it. I'm trying to see if it's on the top, but whenever I put it into the computer and I go and export, it doesn't give me 4K as an option. I can't remember if it gives me, I think it's at like 750, and that's just, it's not good enough. So I'm trying to figure out getting a new camera. I might use this for like additional shots and whatnot, because I would like to have multiple angles. Maybe I'll think about getting a GoPro or 2 or something. And then Patreon, that whole thing is still getting set up. I'm trying to figure out like the tier system and like the benefits of every tier, and like just trying to make it worth each tier as it goes up, you know. So trying to, you know, decide all of that. So if you have any comments, questions, concerns with anything that I showed, I might start doing short tutorial like videos too, of like, this is what I'm doing to do this. There's other techniques that are out there, some that I use sometimes, and sometimes I just disregard and do it whatever way that I want. There's quick and easy ways to do things, and sometimes I negate those and do it in an opposite way, like sewing the elastic, like the waistband with the elastic inside of it. I could have done it in a completely different way and it would have turned out, I mean, I hated that waistband, so it would have still came off, but the center back, I could just have sewn both of those up at the same exact time, and then just top stitch down them. So like things like that, you know, little fun techniques that are out there. That way I break down like little steps. So things to think about. So if you want me to go into depth inside of those, leave me a comment, let me know what you want to see. Give me a like, subscribe, you know, so that you're notified. Hit the bell because apparently that does something. I know that it does something, but yeah. So, and I will catch you guys later. Bye.